Hello, everyone. And it resized your camera.
Yeah. Are we back to OBS issues?
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking at it 30 seconds ago and it worked fine. Anyway, so, hello, everyone. While I resize Alex's camera, let me introduce today's topic, which is incremental refresh.
I just now got it on my side here.
Yeah.
I love it. Tiny little square. Oh, man, that was a great stream for those kind of coming over from Gyna Cube.
I mean, it depends how you feel about Will. We all know that Amanda is the true PM. No, Will's great.
I think the fact that he hit home on hey, next year we're gonna concentrate a little bit more on the visuals, kind of hearing the feedback from the community. I was like, man, that was so awesome to hear.
Yeah.
I think you and me have kind of talked about it, out in the kind of the forums too. But it's like, hey, I think we're doing a pretty good job at the enterprise space.
Yeah.
It's composite models that should keep us busy.
There's so many features that have shipped in the last 2 years around enterprise stuff that, it's going to take a long time to learn it all. And, when I started playing with composite models, because I don't think it's a secret that we do a dog food release internally before it goes out in public, I sent a long email of feedback to them. Your camera just resized again. Skype is... while I sent them a long list of suggestions, really what I want them to do is ignore my suggestions and build a bunch of visual stuff, because I think that's going to make the biggest difference.
Yeah. Knowing kind of the feedback I've heard from you, it sounds like you've already battle tested it a bit.
Yeah.
And you're pretty good.
We've had really great experience, and I even, one of the tests that I did the other day is have live connected to 2 cubes, and I made a relationship between them on DateKey, between the date tables, and ran a query that queried a measure from each visual across the date time, and it worked great. Now, that's not the most intense test because it only has to pass back and forth, a couple hundred values. But there's definitely a lot of performance there. But that's not what we're talking about today. Which, what we want to talk about is incremental refresh and why it's the number one feature that you're not using, but you should.
I think we're going to kind of come full circle here a bit too. Yeah. If we go back to our first episode, we're like, hey, you've kind of grown out of the desktop. A lot of the things you'll probably start learning about incremental refresh and just partitions in general. It's a lot of external tools.
Yeah.
That'd be SQL Server Management Studio, kind of Tableau Editor. The low to no code version, especially for just the tabular model scripting language. There's just a lot going on. But do we want to just go ahead and get incremental refresh set up?
Yeah, let's start by talking about just setting up incremental refresh, which we'll do on my computer. So let me make sure I have the right stuff up, and then go over to my end. And your camera shrank everywhere. So
I'll just assume I'm not on camera today.
Yeah. So not sure what that's about, but at least they can probably hear you. So let's talk about incremental refresh. So we've got some data here. This data is what percentage of our viewers are subscribed, and unfortunately, y'all are not doing a good enough job. We really need more of you to subscribe because this trajectory is just really killing us in our YouTube reviews.
I think there's a correlation with the home purchase, though.
Well, it may be that in October we really stopped making new content, but regardless, everybody that watches this video needs to subscribe so we can get a really huge spike in December and January. And to make that happen, we need to soup up this report with incremental refresh. We've got a date column here we've got some facts that change over time. And the way we set up incremental refresh is first we need, so basically we're going to put a parameter on our date dimension, and then in the desktop, the parameter will just be whatever we set it to. And in the service is going to take control of the parameter and create different versions of the query for different date ranges. And so the first thing we need to do is create the parameter. And the parameter has to be called range start and range end. The first time I set up incremental refresh, I was like, oh, I've got multiple tables I want to do this on. I'll have a different parameter set for each table. It doesn't work like that. There's one parameter. It can work. Range start.
So these are reserved keywords.
Yeah. And then the type is date time. There's no date type in a parameter. And so we can go ahead. Oh, and then we need to give these a value. So we're going to say 12/1/2020. Actually, let's do 10/1. Be better for this example. 10/1/2020. Okay. So I've got my two parameters, and now I'm going to create a filter. And this one we can do sort of in the UI. So we're going to do a between filter, and we want it to be after or equal to, and I feel like there's an option to select a parameter. I think once I put this in and then I go to edit, that's when it comes up. So
a couple different options. Did you do the
advanced? You have to go to advanced.
Yeah.
And then I don't know. So anyway, we're gonna do this. We're gonna write M, because that's what you're supposed to do. So we've got range start, and here we've got range end. And I guess I used the wrong. So now I've got this, except it doesn't work because we're mixing data types. So we need to come back to our change type step. And even though this doesn't have times, we need to change it to a date time. In a minute, we'll come back to how you can set this up with what's the word? With different data types. But for now, we'll just set it up like this. So now this parameter, that's not right. 31/20. Okay. So now I've got my parameter set. I'll hit close and apply. And there's no data. So the filter worked, but I reversed my start and end parameters. So there we go. Hit close and apply, and data's pulled in. And now when I'm working in desktop, my model only has my 1 month or whatever I selected of data. So if you're working with a large model, this is great because now everything I do in desktop is going to be way faster than if I was using what's the word? Just using the whole data set. So for example, my work model, which is about 45 gigs on disk in the service, the PBIX file is only a megabyte. Because with incremental refresh, we keep it nice. Yeah, so David Veld, no. There's only one set of parameters, and so they can have, they need to be tied to the same parameter. However, once we have the parameter setup, we're not done. And so this will maybe come in and show we need to configure incremental refresh policy. So we're going to right-click on the table and open up this window, which is easy to forget about. And we have to turn incremental refresh on for the table. And so for each table, we can set a different policy. And so here, I'm going to store the last 1 year, and I want to refresh the last 10 days every time I refresh. And this may actually be enough to do what David was asking about, but like in terms of variable parameters, you can't do it. And then you have some options to detect data changes. I'm not sure we'll get to that because I'm not sure we have a good example for it. And then only refresh complete days. So if I were to refresh this now, it wouldn't pull in data for the 12th if I check this box, but I'm not going to check it. So now I've got my policy here. Yeah, we've got this set up. The next piece then is to publish to the service. So I'm going to go ahead and hit publish, and I'm going to save my changes, and then go on the desktop. We'll do IR demo. And I'm going to publish it to a premium per user workspace because we're going to need to do some premium things. So this feature does not require premium, everything, but some of the things we'll do towards the end will require premium. Yeah. Great. So, Alex, I'm going to throw the screen back to the talk mode, where your camera is visible, but comical, while I pull up the service so I don't accidentally show
That's what I was getting ready to say.
Thing.
It's like, I think Alex D is leading us down a road here of a lot of MSIT. I think the biggest thing that people will take away, at least right off the bat, is you can only have it on one table. And in essence, that policy,
no,
you can put it on multiple tables, but
you can only have one
really
set of parameters, which means that for a given you can't, while you're working in desktop, have different date ranges in your desktop. Once it's in the service, all the partitions are refreshed in parallel. So it doesn't really matter that you only have one set of parameter because the different tables aren't coupled to each other. So as long as your policy says keep the last X years and refresh the last X days, it doesn't really matter that the parameters are the same because each partition sort of does its own thing. Now, what you can't do is say, on any table, I want to keep I don't want the last 6 months of data. I just want the last 2 complete years. And don't refresh the current year until you get to the end of the year. That scenario is not supported, but to be honest, if you're doing something like that, like you might be better off just manually refreshing it the once a year, once a month that you need to pull that data in.
Yeah, and that's going to be a lot of the XMLA, kind of either premium or premium per user.
Yeah.
Definitely people exploring that. And then kind of Sandeep, like we were just talking about before the stream, he did a really good kind of Jupyter notebook in Python, kind of doing processing, automation of creating partitions.
Yeah.
So there's just be a lot of more kind of on the pro dev side.
Yeah. Okay, so let me go back to my screen now that I have the workspace up. And so I've got my model here, and it's published. It hasn't been refreshed yet. And so we're going to look at what happens so I'm going to connect to it just so we can observe what's going on. So let's connect, and I think this is the correct workspace. Nope. So I'm going to get my endpoint and connect. Let me just sign in.
So this is in SQL Server.
Yeah, so I'm in
your analysis services.
I'm in SSMS, and you don't have to install anything special. You just have to have the latest version. One thing, whenever I've had problems with the XML endpoint in SSMS, I find out that you have to update your SSMS regularly because they keep updating the Power BI stuff, and it requires the latest libraries that are going to be in the latest SSMS. Same thing's true for DAX Studio and Tabular Editor. I just find they're better about reminding me to update. SSMS does an auto update, and also like the update notifications go in the Windows update bar, which I find sort of impossible too.
And then Alex, we've got a really great question here. So Fernando would ask, can you do this in Tabular Editor?
Yeah, so you can do some of what we're going to do in Tabular Editor, but not everything. One of the things, if you watch this presentation, that's new to Tabular Editor 3 is the ability to trigger refreshes. And when we get a little deeper in, we're going to want to trigger refreshes from SSMS. And so...
and that'll be Tabular Editor 3 then that you can do processing.
Yeah, which is really exciting.
But in Tabular Editor 2, you can only build the partitions. You can't actually process.
Exactly. So right now, if I look at my table, I've got a single partition. And
do you have Zoom It by chance?
Sorry?
Do you have a Zoom It so we can zoom in on that?
Control 4, yeah. So we have... I went in and I opened up the partitions. We just have one partition that has 60 rows. So that's going to be the date range that we selected. 30 days, 2 rows per date range. And if we look, I'm also going to open this up in Tabular Editor. So let me connect again. Probably have to do some more two-factor. Maybe not. Nope. Okay. And if we look at our partition, let's see. Where, Alex? Shouldn't the partition show right here?
Yeah, if you expand it out, does it not have a hierarchy there? It's a little small here on my Surface Go.
There. Oh, there are no partitions, so that's why I'm not seeing them. So, oh, that's the date table. That's why. Okay, here's the partitions. Okay, so in the partition, you can see that the DAX is here. And right now, we just see the parameters, and the parameters are stored elsewhere. But that's going to change. So we're going to go back to the service now, and I'm going to refresh this data set. And it's just going to take just a minute. Shoot, I used a text file. So we're going to take a little diversion here. And we're going to install a gateway.
Gosh, no. Make it stop. It's my weekend.
Yeah. So, let's take a look at some questions while we're doing this.
A lot of kind of XMLA.
Yeah.
I think people are starting to see, hey, like, we got to move into this. I do want to hit home on partitions, at least as it relates to Power BI Desktop.
Mm-hmm.
When you're working with Power Query, it's going to load it into one partition.
Yeah. Power BI Desktop, is not partition aware. The other thing, going back to the very first question, which is, yes, this is my new house. You can tell that there's a box in the background and everything is the same color. But I'm no longer monopolizing our entire living room to do these streams, which was the big driver for the delays. So...
You know, most people upgraded like their microphone and their video camera during the pandemic to do live streaming. Alex D was just like, I'm going to just go buy a new house.
No,
so
I did that too. And the house is, so it's going to be a while before this channel's profitable if we factor the house in. Yeah. So once we get this gateway going, we can continue.
I love that. The 2 Alex mortgage.
Yeah,
gosh.
Exactly. Yeah, you're ready to start chipping in? Okay, so I think everything's all set up now. So let's go ahead and refresh this page. See what we see. Gateway. Yes, great. Edit credentials. Sign in. Great. So now, if we go back to the workspace and hit refresh, should just work. Yes, it's working. And it shouldn't take very long at all. I guess the gateway is slower. I never have to use the gateway. There, it's done. So now, let's see what happens if we open up the partitions now. And look at that. We have so many more partitions, and they each have data in them. And create a bunch of partitions that I don't need. It creates a partition for every partition needed to satisfy your refresh policy. So I said that I wanted to... so I said I wanted to refresh the last 10 days in my policy, and so it's created days up to the next month so that it can refresh the individual partitions as needed. And then once we get to the next month, the other partitions will get truncated into... I actually, Alex, I have 48 gigs.
48? Oh, man, yeah. I'm sorry.
If we pop over here, we've got an 8700K, and we've got 48 gigs of RAM, and we've got a formerly awesome but now somewhat obsolete GPU, although it does quite fine. Yeah, so everything's very fast for me.
I think if you've been following Mark Russinovich on Twitter, he's doing like 256 gig or something wild machine, and he's playing Tetris and like Minesweeper on it. Like, that's about right. Buy the most expensive thing and then play the most 2D thing in the world.
Yeah. So we have all the partitions needed to satisfy our policy. So I said to keep the last 1 year of data, maybe it was 2 years of data. So there's a 2019 partition, even though there's no data, because 2019 is required for the policy. And then when we get into 2021, I think the 2019 partition will drop out, because now 1 year just includes 2020. And so it automatically deletes and creates new partitions as going. So let's take a look now at what happened in Tabular Editor. So let's just reconnect. Oh, wait. I tried to deploy changes instead of refresh the connection. It's great. It crashed because I didn't want to deploy those changes.
Don't connect to production.
Well, so now if I come into my table partitions, I see all the partitions, and let's see, shouldn't I be seeing M here, Alex?
Yeah.
Where should I be seeing the M?
That should be in the properties down there on the right. Do you not see any?
No, I don't.
Go to an earlier one. What was your first one that you created? Partition.
Well, so there weren't any, there was just an auto partition with a GUID, and then they all got recreated. So when I've looked at this before, there's been an M script in each partition, and the M script no longer has the parameter. It has the hard-coded date based upon each of the partition properties. So it doesn't. It actually just like finds and replace the partition or the parameter and puts in the data, like the actual dates. So that's what
Donald thinking. He's like, I don't think you can see it. If you actually want to pop over to my machine.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. Taking us back to like episode one. Felt very Star Wars when I said that. So episode one. All these heavy tools that you have to use. Ever kind of done the Azure analysis services, SQL Server data tools. And this is where I'm still like watching. Appears that there's echo.
Yeah.
So we'll give them a moment here. Well, give us a thumbs up. Give it a moment here. Test 1 2 1 2. Just looking the echo big time. Hopefully, thumbs up. Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Heavier tools. It's not Tableau Editor, SQL Server. Visual Studio data tools. I'm connected out to Azure Analysis Services with XML for Power BI. You could obviously connect out to that model as well. And when I say heavy, it's just as you open it, you're going to feel like the sluggishness of it. So Tableau Model Explorer, so very similar. You see our data set here. Here's our source. Here's the various tables, the partitions. So if we were to look at these partitions here, we can create them, obviously through just the point and click. So we'll get a prompt. Here's our M script. So just like Alex was kind of talking with us here, he's like, hey, why don't I see my script? Well, it should be there because it's going to need it to execute. 2013, if I was to kind of zoom in here and call this out right here, here we go. That's our filter. Change to 2014. Take a wild guess of what changed. 2014. 15, 16, etc. If we wanted to, we could realistically just say copy. I've now created a new partition here. When was the last time it was processed? Obviously just never, so I'm going to update this now, give it a meaningful name. 2017 orders. I'm going to update my M script here. Instead of looking at 16, we're going to look at 17. I can validate. Gives me a nice little checkbox that yes, the M is good. It's the best it's ever seen, it said. And I was like, oh, thank you. Oh gosh, it's going to try and make me remember my credentials. Hopefully I can just sign with AAD. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Yep. Sweet. Cool. Connect. So very similar though. We're creating these partitions. You could do it manually, especially if it's like, hey, we're only doing it like once a year, that we're going to go out and update and refresh this one little thing. Mm-hmm. That's great.
And you can also script out partition changes to happen automatically in tabular model scripting language. If you're doing this in analysis services, one of the great things about Power BI Incremental Refresh is it sort of does the whole thing for you with no code, right? Like the amount of configuration we set up so far probably would take, I don't know, a week's worth of dev time to do.
I'm gonna just jump over here to Management Studio again. So we'll do kind of connecting out to this now that we have it. There we go. Good luck. Take me through all the authentication. All right, this multi-factor, man. I thought these Face IDs, they just had our biometrics. We just look at our machine. It just worked. All right, here, cool. So I've got the exact same. We just have, what am I in? Wide World Importers. I'm going to connect out to tables.
So you're connected to a local analysis services model or a AAS model here?
Yeah. AAS, yep. So orders, I can look at the partitions that we've now created. I've not deployed that, I think that new one that I created, but just pretend like I did. So right here, 13, 14, 15, 16, we can go through and obviously just manually process them here. If we wanted to edit the underlying M script,
yeah,
right, pretty not neat, but it is what it is.
Yeah, so in Power BI, editing the M script is big capital letters not supported. Yeah.
Yeah, but right here, like a lot of these things, you get to choose. What is it that you want to do with this partition? So I mean, it could be like a full, you could do just like metadata only, or just like a sample or kind of a default. So especially if you're doing like dev testing where you're going to do like a direct query, but you're like, hey, I'm actually going to load a sample of data up here just for general testing purposes. You can also kind of have those properties that are configurable. Scripting, though, this kind of gets back to the TMSL, so the tabular model scripting language, which I think we're going to be probably diving into a lot in 2021, where it's just like, hey, I want to automate a lot of this stuff. I don't want to go out and manually create these partitions. So there's just a lot where we need to start thinking about it. The best way that I kind of position it is Christian Wade did a video a long time ago where he was basically like, hey, nobody likes writing or doing this stuff, so we brought it into Power BI Desktop and made it as simple as possible.
Yeah.
And I was like, gosh, that is the best description I've ever heard.
Yeah. So speaking of which, should we go back to desktop and talk about some additional wrinkles that we can bring into our setup that we did before?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me switch back over to my screen and let's do that. Oh, and there's your little face. So we'll make you visible here.
Making fun of my PBI champ. Yep, that's one of our demo tenants where we get to beat up on things.
Yeah.
Pretty fun.
There are certain features in Microsoft's tenant that are different, and there are also features that we just aren't allowed to use. And so PBI champ is a sales tenant where we can do stuff. And everybody's an admin there, so it's a little bit of a wild, wild west. But
yeah.
Okay, so going back to our initial setup, let me just duplicate this table so we can have it incremental refresh working on different tables so we can look at that. But before, one of the things we had to do was we had to change the data type of our field that we were operating the parameter against. And that's not great because it makes our model bigger. So what if I wanted to keep this as a date type? So one thing I could do was I could just change the type after my filter. But that's not great. And like we're doing this date conversion before filtering. That's usually not the best practice in terms of ordering of steps. What if I just want this to be date the whole time? Or what if I have a DateKey data type and the conversion is not so easy for the system? It's actually pretty easy. Well, I don't know if easy is quite the word, but we can write some more M to edit this. So what we can do is, and Alex, I'm actually for the type conversion. I'm not remembering off the top of my head what the M word is. I think
it's text format, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you're? Then you'll have to convert the date to text.
Yeah. So now
I'm just loving you writing M.
Yeah.
Man, I'm gonna sit back. I'm gonna enjoy my coffee.
So I feel like it's not.
Are you getting close? I'm gonna see if I can beat you here on my side.
Yeah. So I think it's actually what we want is datetime.date. So we're taking. No, we want the opposite of that. So. Oh, yeah. So the date time from function creates a date time from the given value. Yeah. So we pipe in a date and we use datetime.from, and I think it should just figure it out. And let's see, and that just works. So once we fiddled around with our M a little bit, it's not that scary. Now we've converted, just for the purpose of the filter, our date value, sort of I don't know if streaming is the right word. That actually means something. But like, we haven't converted the data storage. We haven't added like a change and change back. We've just said, hey, when you're passing this filter, you need to do a type conversion. There's another thing that we might have, which I sort of alluded to before, is what if this column, let's do a custom column. What if we had a column that was kind
of like an integer based almost?
Yeah, an integer one. Time plus date.
And really, if we're thinking like performance wise, it may even be better to convert kind of these into an integer.
A day, and we want to put in the date to all of these, and then what we do is we do this is times 100, and this is times 10,000, I think. Oh, I doubled up. IntelliSense in M. Thought I saw something the other day about how this is just the greatest feature ever, but that's not my experience.
No, it's bad at the moment. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone feeling that way too, but it almost feels unwritable with autocomplete.
Yeah. So now I've got this nice integer, right? Can I just like write as like? Is this gonna work, Alex? Nope. Can I just do this and it'll do the date? Nope. I always feel like when I write M, I should just like put my type conversions as part of the step, and I can never quite remember how to do it. But I'm just going to change the type here because I'm lazy. And so now I've got this date key. And what if I wanted to do our incremental refresh against my date key? So date key and date key. Okay, so the date time from can't just like do it on the. We actually have to be a little bit more specific. So can we let's go back a step. What can we extract from this using the function? So can I no, I can't. So, but we can do math to recreate this. So, let me just open up the other place I have this. I'm going to go back to the talk screen here while we do this. I have this.
Code.
I'm going to cheat, and instead of remembering the code on the fly, I'm going to look up this string because it's a little more complicated. But basically, we can do a type conversion on the fly so that we can work on non-dates. I mean, they're still dates, just a little further away. In fact, rather than pull it up in my own personal work, let's do this. There's a great blog post on this topic. So let's go back to sharing my screen. And if you look for Formu,
oh yeah, he did a fantastic series.
Refresh date key. How to configure incremental refresh in Power BI with. Am I feeling lucky? With date key. Great. So, Yeah. So let's bring this in to our demo model. And each date. And so he's actually doing instead of trying to change the integer back into a date time, which is the path I was going down. That was going to be not great. He's actually taking and doing the same math we did to make our integer, and he's doing that on the parameter. And so we have date greater than or equal to, this is the exact thing we wrote just a second ago, and then the same thing here. And so now, let's see why it decided that the whole thing should just be a string. So that was an interesting choice. Date. Oh, right, the previous step thing. That's change type one.
I'm remembering on my side here.
Yeah. No, I just need to fix the typos. And
well, is he doing the math? Is that what he's doing?
Yeah, exactly.
Kick it over to mine.
Sure. You've got a cooler way?
Oh yeah, much cooler. So let's do kind of a few things here. First and foremost, if you're not familiar with shared, so equals hash shared. Zoom in here. So blank query. So in the product itself, there is documentation. So it equals hash shared. This will bring up all the Power Query functions. Once again, I hit enter and it didn't actually go. This is just that frustrating experience of Power Query at the moment. Frankly, unusable from an IntelliSense perspective. It is what it is. I still love it. I'm always going to love it. It appears echo. Awesome. We're good. So getting back here. Come on. Come on, mashup engine. Don't embarrass me in front of my friends. Awesome. So all of the functions have been returned as a record set. You can click on the table. You can do it beforehand if you really wanted to. Like I'm just in the habit of record.to table. So in this way I can actually sort. So right off the bat, get it into columns and kind of rows. So within this, I'm looking for a specific thing that is called format. So within my filters, I can continue to use the GUI. At this rate, I'm already invested in this IntelliSense world that I now, torture myself with. Oh my gosh, do you see how bad this is? Rows. Each name. We're gonna do a text doc.
Alex, you just need to learn M as well as Inca so you can turn it off. The IntelliSense entirely.
I mean, that's the world I grew up in. I like. So I would much prefer that. I just would torture myself at this point. Yeah, and press enter and it goes to a new line as opposed to actually executing the command. So text.format. This is an incredible function. So the more you kind of learn these things, the more you kind of remember them. A nice little trick here. So I'll do another blank query. Like, text.format, what is that? Let's see, it gives me the arguments. Format string arguments is any, but I actually want documentation. I'm going to delete that. I'm just going to type in the function name itself, press enter. So if you just know the name of the function you're looking for, if you type it in without the parentheses, it'll bring back the arguments here, the documentation. All right, so now I see it. I've got these format capabilities. So just what are the arguments? What do I want to kind of bring back? Maybe culture if I really needed to.
I did not know that.
Yep.
So I've got this kind of taken care of. I'm starting to think about my range start, my range end, all this math. I am personally just not good at math. I am much better at saying, how can I use the code to do the thing that I want to do? So once again, we're going to do text formats on. Oh, it's so sluggish. I'm literally typing in real time, and this is how long it takes.
I think, Alex,
So
you
one
need
of
to get a computer like I do, like I have. We can just put that on the To Alex Mortgage. It'll be fine.
So now I have, what are my arguments? In this example, and I'll try to remember off the top of my head, but I believe it's 4 Y's in uppercase, 2 M's, and then 2 D's. We'll see how close I get. So if I do this now, so we cannot convert the date time to type text.
So throw a date conversion on the top of it.
You got it. Yep. So we remember that we have to have date time right for our incremental refresh. Example. Let's do another one. Actually, we might be able to use this other one here. Datetime.to text. Another great one. This way we don't even have to worry about that text format, but we do have it here as a format argument. So we'll even get rid of text.format in this example. But I just look for these reserved words like format, or kind of text, range end, no conversion, boom. All right, so capital Y's, not a good go. So let's do lowercase.
I don't think that month worked either.
Yep. So 2 capital M's, boom. So I now have this. 4 lowercase y's, 2 uppercase m's, 2 lowercase d's. We're committing it to memory. We're just going to remember it every time. Probably not true. We're probably going to type it. It doesn't look like how we want. But then from here, right, we can just convert it over to our number. So number.from, boom. It's now a number, 1, 2, 3. So instead of worrying about that math, times, what is it, 10,000, etc. Date time.to text, give it the actual arguments where you're saying, hey, I just want the date part, so I'm not really worried about the time. I know it's part of incremental refresh, but I'm actually not going to use that. And that same could be applied if you had just year and month. You know what? I don't need the day. There we go. And then you can apply this because it's still going to leverage this within the incremental refresh. You've just done a little bit of editing. In terms of query folding and all these capabilities, it doesn't care. It doesn't know the difference. Alex, to kind of get back to earlier, if you go to datetime filters, it's not any of these. You have to go down to a custom filter, and this is all you do. So if you go to custom filter, you can then get the parameter.
That's what I was missing.
So it's all these little clicks where it's just like, to explain incremental refresh to someone, it's
I was sort of expecting there to be a universal filter UI and the selecting the between just pre-populated those drop downs.
No. And then you have to make sure that it is after or equal to or is before. This is kind of the instructions. I'm sure you could probably even ignore some of this if you truly wanted to, but this is how they lay it out.
Yeah, if you don't do this, it'll work. It's just you'll get duplicates in your data because one partition isn't aware of the other partition in terms of what data is in it. You doubled up on range start there.
There we go. So we have this now up in the M. You could change this. You could edit this, especially if you're doing like, you know what? I don't like Power Query. I don't know who you are. You're a monster, but maybe you don't like it. And you're like, I just want to write SQL by hand. But you could still inject these incremental refresh policies. It's just at that point you're going to be concatenating strings. So like text.combine. Instead of converting this over to a number, you would just want to leave it back as text. So that at that rate, it's like, hey, I'm writing this dynamic SQL statement for me, just leveraging incremental refresh still, and then doing all these other fun things. But these are little nuances that you kind of learn along the way. The big thing that we've not hit home on is I built this incredible model. I published it up in the service. I just remember here within Power BI Desktop, I don't have any capabilities to build additional partitions. I have no concept of it. I can't process them. So I published it now up in the service, and I go, gosh, I want to change that report page now.
Yeah. Or another problem, Alex, on the same vein.
Good.
I mean, maybe it's the completely opposite problem, but I publish my report, I do my incremental refresh, great, it's only refreshing in the last couple days, and then my finance team's like, hey, we made a mistake in revenue, we need to restate revenue for the last year. How do we do those things? Not in desktop.
Yep. So let me at least get this kind of published here. So we have incremental builds, at least on the Power Query side. We're going to do it real quick in the UI. This is where query folding is so great. Just kind of, going after the database, the massive portions of it. You don't have to go after everything in a full refresh. You just say, hey, go after the kind of latest targets. I'll get this set up real quick. We'll upload it in the service. And this is where I was seeing a lot of comments out on Twitter where people are like, I published my model, but I want to change it now. Well, I'm sorry, but you can't do that. With incremental refresh, you are done. You cannot download that file. Yeah. And then this comes back to kind of that pro versus premium per user. If you want to do those, external tools or even some of the heavier tools like the Visual Studio, you've kind of moved past the desktop.
And
you are onto
also,
the pro dev space.
I say this, but once you're using incremental refresh, you should be using source control. Even if it's just, I save my file on SharePoint, like, needing to download from the service, I don't think is a big issue. I definitely know folks who have it as an integral part of their workflow. But once you get to this point, I think you should rethink a workflow like that.
Yep.
So.
But this also comes back to like that concept of sample. Like, do you need all of your data locally, or can you just work off of 10,000 rows, or maybe it's 100,000, and then you're just doing metadata deployments using application lifecycle management toolkit, right? Because that's what you do for kind of the massive models.
Yeah. So let's talk about why I said this is like the best feature you're not using. It makes desktop development really fast and small. And it's the only way to get a large model. So you can, in the service, you can upload a PBIX up to 10 gigs. So if you need a bigger model, you have to do it through incremental refresh. And you don't want to work with a 10 gig PBIX. That would bring even this computer to its knees. I know, I used to work on like a 1 gig PBIX, and it made things slow. And so Alex is just messing around.
I'm getting closer. It'll be up in here in one moment. We'll no download.
And so when you're using incremental refresh, you have a better desktop experience. It's required to make your models larger, and your refreshes are faster. So like, why wouldn't you use incremental refresh? I mean, if your data is like under 100 megabytes, then sure, it doesn't matter, right? Like the sample data I did, where it refreshed in 30 seconds, but otherwise, it's going to make a big difference for you.
Yeah.
So there's one other thing, Alex, I wanted to show, or are you ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, let me just get back to sharing my screen here. I move things around when you're presenting, which is maybe a mistake, but it makes it easier to follow. So now that I've refreshed this data set that we did before, if I refresh it again here, and then let's go into SSMS, which is doing something weird here. You can see when each partition was processed, And so when this is done, which it already is, and I refresh this view of our partitions, we'll see that these ones were processed 40 minutes after these ones. But what if you have that scenario I talked about before where it's like, hey, we got to restate data for Q1. There's no way using the service to do that. You have to republish your data set. You can't, there's no button that triggers a full refresh of your data set other than reprocessing, but republishing. So, but here in SSMS, we can get around that. So if I wanted to refresh this, so like on my team, what we do a lot of the times is we'll add columns to existing fact tables. And so we'll use Alm Toolkit to deploy the changes. And when you set that up, we can disable processing, and then we can have it retain partitions and retain policy-based partitions. And so when we publish, it doesn't automatically refresh the data set or replace the data with our new columns. And then we can go through and work through refreshing these tables one by one, because it can take some time. We're really hoping with Gen 2 we don't have to do one by one. But now I can select and say, okay, I've got my restated data loaded in my source, and I just need to process these quarters. And there's a couple different options, but we can do a process data. And we can fire off a refresh for our partitions behind the scenes. Using, the service, we can only refresh sort of the quote-unquote in-policy partitions. For the out-of-policy, you have to go here. Yeah, so yeah.
But I'll kind of let you finish that.
No, there was no thought. I was just speaking without thinking. I know.
All right, so I'm going to jump into kind of the whole concept here, right? So I have my incremental load. I have kind of my workspace here. Let me log in real quick. Because I'm a champ.
I'm not a champ.
Awesome. We get this loaded here. I've got my incremental upload, so I'm working locally right. I also have it published up in the service. It's this whole concept of, hey, I actually want to make a change to this report page because somebody told me that they didn't like bar charts, they like line charts, and they're like, all right, gosh, I'll bring it back down, and I got to do some other changes too. Obviously, you can edit up in the service. This really kind of gets back to that whole separation of you should have a file that's specifically dedicated to your model, another one that's live connected to the visuals.
Because the only way to change the visuals that you've published is by publishing the report. And that wipes out the whole data set, including any historical partitions. And so you need to, you have to do your full processing again, which if it takes an hour, it's no big deal. But my model, it takes like 15 hours to process the full thing.
Yeah, that's insane. So we tried to download from the service now to, continue to work on our file. Well, I'm sorry, but partitions aren't supported. This dataset has some features that cannot be downloaded to a PBX file. Killing me. I want to work locally, but I still want to publish kind of up in the cloud. This is where it gets back to Alm Toolkit. Kind of in your example, you've built tables, you've chosen, hey, I've maybe filtered this for just 10,000 rows. It also has an incremental refresh policy on it. So if we're to kind of get back over here, edit query, select top, 1,000 or something. Yeah. That's all point and click. So if we're to do keep rows, keep top rows.
And we actually have another parameter that sets the number of rows, and then we edit the step.
Yep.
So if the parameter equals 0, it just passes through the previous step, and if the parameter equals anything else, it does a top in based on the parameter value.
And now you got I just want to write more M. I was like, we could put this earlier in the chain and kind of show that if this then that. But yes, I guess I can just bring it up one step. Come on, get out of here. Discard. If you can introduce some type of filter earlier that says, let's just do. I'm just going for it at this point. I'm just loving M. Row limiter. There we go. And I feel like this is a video that I haven't seen much out on, but that is extremely important. And I think you can only do decimal number, right? They don't support. Yeah, they don't support whole number.
Yeah, if you do a different one, I don't even think there is an integer parameter. But Will was sort of talking about this, like these decimal parameters. You can change them in the service. So just so everybody knows, we're at time, but we're going to go for another, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes to get through this example, and then we'll wrap up.
Yep. So in this, how do I want to approach it? I'll do it properly. If row limiter true or false. There we go. Then we can skip it then. So if row limit test is true, no IntelliSense here on the names.
Yeah. I think it's because you're missing a comma, and so it just stopped evaluating.
Yep. So right here we could have a test. You know, do I want to put some type of conditional control, and then we just want to update this as well to say row limiter. And then you can configure this up in the service. So maybe you have it at 0, or maybe you have it at a much lower value. And I think one of the great benefits here lately has been that you can now control that through deployment pipeline between various stages.
So you publish this with your deployment with your row limiter set to 10, and you publish it up. And then you hit your deployment pipeline, move it to test, change your row limiter to like 100,000. And so you have enough data that you can test your user experience, but you can tell your users all the numbers are wrong and like just suck it up. But it'll be nice and small. It won't have too big of an impact on your capacity. And that also means, since all the numbers are wrong, maybe you can share the experience with users that don't necessarily have permission to see the actual numbers. And once you've got...
Don't go after the entire mountain and try and publish that before you start getting feedback.
Yeah.
Like, sample. Get more samples out there. Get feedback. Don't build out the full partition experience and automating and everything, and then they get to the very end and go, well, we're never going to use
Guess what? We need you to add a bunch of functionality, and you look at it and you're like, oh, I need to remodel my whole data set. And then once you're done, you can... Or just as part of your regular pipeline, when you move it to your production workspace, it automatically changes the parameter to 0, and now there's no limiter applied at all. So, yeah.
Just doing a hard refresh here, but you'd be able to see your parameters. I don't know, mine's still just taking a moment here, but it's all right. Nothing works around here. What's going on?
I don't know. Well,
but it's a topic, like I think heading into a lot of this premium per user, people wanting to do kind of processing with different incremental refresh policies. Unfortunately, just having one reserved, range start and range end, it's going to be automation.
So let's talk a little bit about premium stuff. The XML stuff endpoint stuff we showed, of course, requires premium per user or premium capacity, but having an incremental refresh policy that works doesn't. So if you want to assign a workspace to premium per user or to an ASKU that you just turn on, just for troubleshooting your incremental refresh or for doing restatements. That can be a very affordable sort of thing to add on. And so you should be using incremental refresh all the time. I mean, 1 gig models are a bear. So even if you're not, quote unquote, needing premium just for the model, you'll still want to use this functionality. Yeah.
And I'm gonna make one last point here, just because I'm in depth with the power query today. I mean, I'm just like thinking of the thing. You can do incremental refresh with data floats. So we can load our data incrementally with the data flow down to the CSV that's stored in the lake. At that point, though, if you want to do an incremental refresh of that CSV into your Power BI data set,
it's actually worse than if you weren't doing incremental refresh. My team tried to do this, and it was just a total disaster.
So today, it does not work until the table.selected_rows function folds against a data flow. I would highly recommend against it. So don't go after, a 500 million row table and say, I'm going to do incremental refresh of the data flow, and I'm not going to incrementally refresh of the data set, and everything is incremental.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We did that. It was horrible. So what happens is each partition, so that because the filter's not foldable, each partition downloads the full data set and then filters it in memory. So instead of loading the full data set once, now you're loading the full data set, 20 times.
So I love data flows. I love kind of the idea, and a buddy of mine is now kind of over there in the program manager, and he sees all of the areas that he wants to fix. So please tag Charles Webb as much as possible over on Twitter if you have ideas. But kind of the enhanced compute engine and enabling that by default, that was something he championed. Hopefully, as we continue to see that just evolve, I'd love to see it just run Spark underneath. And then it would be really fast, and it'd be really powerful, and we could do a lot of fun things. I would stick with incremental refresh at the data set.
Or, Alex, we could just strip out the M engine entirely and just use SQL and have M not be used for anything.
No SQL. Done with it.
Okay, well,
let's get out of here then.
With that disappointment, I think it's time to end.
Yeah. Well, sorry, SQL folks. I enjoy my nights and weekends. I just have no interest in backups.
Greg, I don't think Charles and Chris Webb are related, since
they're not. But it's hilarious. At least in Microsoft sense, we have our aliases, which is just like a shortened abbreviation, of our names. And theirs is exact except for one letter, so they constantly
each
get
other's mails.
Well,
considering they're both concerned with Power BI query stuff, it's not.
It's even more confusing. That's great. I'll be sure to tag him too over on Twitter, just so if anyone's interested in kind of following him and keeping up with the story on data flows, we'll have a lot of great stuff to talk about. Alm Toolkit, though, definitely kind of use that to merge your local development, kind of the sampling of data, if you do have the incremental refresh policies. If you're looking to kind of create them, Tabular Editor is just a fantastic kind of lightweight tool. Unfortunately, it does not process them, so you're now jumping over to SQL Server Management Studio. It sounds like Tabular Editor 3, which he did announce, he's looking at a pricing model. It's going to have some of those capabilities. So, I think we're still at I know my personal vote, I would like one tool to rule them all, but it seems like for where a lot of us are at, getting back to the first video of ours, you're going to have to just jump into a lot of various tools.
And for Tabular Editor 3, if you go to Reed Havens' YouTube channel, Daniel did a really great overview of sort of what to expect. And in there's a link to a survey to request preview access.
Please take
and they're
this.
also taking feedback on what you might be willing to pay for the features that were demoed. I know I'm certainly willing to pay for them. But, they might be interested. Your feedback will certainly help with their decision. And also, I think we're going to try and get a preview copy and maybe do a show on it.
That was in my comments on that survey. I was like, I did tab editor in an hour.
Yeah.
Come on.
So, and
I would love to battle test it, kind
Yeah.
of you and me, to see how everything that I watched and saw on it, I was impressed. I definitely think it deserves some types of financial backing.
I mean, the scope of features they have in mind, I think, is definitely the scope worthy of a paid product. I think for some folks, those extra features aren't a huge difference. Like, it's not enough to stop using desktop entirely, and so, yeah.
And he's keeping Tableau Editor 2, I guess the current version, he's keeping that free and open source.
Just won't be receiving some of the differentiating features that are going into Tableau Editor 3, which totally makes sense. So, okay. Have a good holidays, everybody. Probably won't be doing a show in 2 weeks due to the fact that it's Christmas. But in the new year, we'll certainly be coming back with shows more regularly.
Yep. And yeah, I'm actually going to be hanging out with Greg, champion Tableau Editor next week. So, as much as Microsoft is closed down at holidays, so please feel free to just hit me up on Twitter. And also hit up Alex D, just because I think he really wants to know what your thoughts are with composite models.
Yeah, absolutely. I love tweeting, but I don't start a lot of tweets. I like replying. So hit me up and we'll have a good conversation.
Awesome, everyone. Well, thank you and enjoy your weekend, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.